And I'd like to introduce to you Steve Hernandez as our speaker this evening. And Steve, can you share the title of what you do?
Well, I'm a park ranger with Oregon State Parks. Currently, I work at Luckiamute Management Unit, and I'll get into what that unit actually does because we're a pretty new management unit. Management unit, what that means is it's a unit that manages multiple parks. So, for instance, throughout the state, there are over 250 state parks or properties that Oregon State Parks manages, and there's about 26-ish units that manage all those parks. So we're one of those units, and the difference between our unit and other units such as Silver Falls State Park is that park is about 80 years old. Our unit is only about 5 years old.
So you have a story to share with us tonight.
Yes.
The park system.
Yes.
And what is that going to touch on? What are we going to cover tonight?
The Willamette River and the Greenway properties along the Willamette River. So some of you folks may know the history on that. Back in the 1970s, Governor Bob Straub wanted to make one continuous park along the Willamette River. That did not work quite the way that that person had imagined. And over the years, we have these scattered properties along the Willamette, and different other units have tried to take care of those properties. And then about 5 years ago, a group got together and said, we need to form a new unit that their specialty is to focus on all the original Greenway properties and then some. So that is what we're going to be talking about, is what Oregon State Parks has been doing in the last 5 years with all the old Greenway properties.
Okay, Steve, tag, you're it.
All right.
We're here to hear your story.
Okay.
Share your screen again. Hopefully we can find that button still.
All right. Let's see.
Yep, you're sending that.
Awesome.
Excellent. So back to the intent of this presentation is just to share with you all. Thank you all for coming by the way. Those of you who are on Zoom won't notice the pies and snacks that we have provided for the folks who did come in person here. But anyways, yeah, so let's get down to it here. Luckiamute Management Unit, what is that? Well, our unit, again, is focused on the Willamette River and all the Greenway properties along the Willamette River. Oregon State Parks is the largest landowner of public land along the Willamette River. I mentioned a story about Governor Bob Straub, who wanted one continuous park system along the Willamette River, and they ran into all kinds of political challenges. And so what our job is to stitch all those properties together and make sense of them all. Originally, when I started, and I'll get into that in just a moment, they wanted us to take care of the whole 187-mile stretch, but they reduced that goal down to just a 90-mile section. So anywho, let me get to the next slide. So this is a draft mission statement of Luckiamute Management Unit. My manager developed this mission statement. Oregon State Parks has its own mission statement, but this draft mission statement is very specific to our management unit, which kind of gives you an idea of what our goals are. So provide safe, healthy, inviting places to boat, camp, fish, picnic, swim, and accommodate other types of compatible recreation for all. So that's the key word, all. You'll see that word, all. Protect a diverse natural environment that hosts valuable cultural and historical treasures, both in the water and on the land, for all to enjoy within the Willamette River corridor. And then promote community interactions that focus on valuing our parks as a cultural, ecological, and financial assets to the community. Quite a mouthful there. Quick facts, again, about our unit. We manage over 5,000 acres along the Willamette River for our 90-mile stretch. Again, that covers a 90-mile stretch from the communities of Harrisburg all the way down to where the Molalla spills into the Willamette. By the way, half of those properties are boat inaccessible only, and the other half we can drive to. Of course, the ones that we can drive to, we have the most maintenance challenges. We manage 7 semi-primitive boating campsites, and we have 3 of them which have seasonal restrooms. And so what that means is, I'm speaking to the choir here. You folks probably all have been on the river at some point, and obviously there's a lot more places to camp than just 7 semi-primitive boating campsites. What that means is we have taken some of the campsites that people have traditionally used on Oregon State Park properties, and in the last 5 years we brought them up to another level, which includes adding picnic tables, adding fire rings. Some of these properties are underwater during the winter time, so that poses all kinds of maintenance challenges. But we wanted to add something a little extra, thinking about being able to provide all kinds of amenities for all kinds of folks, not just your kind of more of your backcountry kind of river folks, but families, people who are just getting on the river who want a different kind of experience. And then 3 of those we have seasonal restrooms at, where we have mounted porta pots to trailers, and we have a fleet of those that we move back and forth every other week, because none of those are accessible for the folks to do the maintenance on. We have to bring them back here, and then we have a vendor that comes out and pumps them out, without getting into too much detail there. Another quick fact is we also care for the oldest park in the state, which is Sarah Helmet State Park. We also manage the last remaining water power grist mill on the West Coast, which of course is the Thompson's Mills Heritage Site. Oregon State Parks acquired that in 2004, and we acquired that property just a few years ago, kind of absorbed that into our unit. I think the powers that be saw that property as kind of a river-related property, so that's how it kind of fits. We also work with 4 different watershed councils. So a lot of our properties have our own old river floodplain. So we have a lot of active river restoration projects. An interesting note about this is a lot of folks don't know that Oregon State Parks has a lot of property that is former or current agricultural land. And because our unit in its proximity in the Willamette Valley, 40% of all agricultural leases in the entire state at all state parks, we have 40% of those at this one unit here. With that saying, we have a lot of handshake agreements with farmers to have maintenance easement roads that access to some of these properties so we can manage them better and take care of them. That's one of the interesting and fun things about this job is learning to be a country politician out there, learning who the movers and shakers are out in the country world there. Welcome.
This is an interesting place to find.
Come on in, you're not on camera. Rob Blickensdorfer just arrived with wife. Your name is? Susie. Welcome, Rob and Susie.
Rob and Susie just showed up.
Right, well, leave that door open in case more people come.
Yeah.
Never know who
Maybe
might.
2 hours for them.
So this
Probably.
next slide gives you a good idea of where we are at in the valley. So that star is Luckiamute, and all the little call outs, all the little green, that's all properties that this unit currently manages. Just to kind of go off script a little bit here is that there are greenway properties on the full 187-mile stretch, including the coastal and the middle fork of the Willamette. So there are greenway properties, let's say on Sully Island, Wapato is one of them, Duck Lake, Scappoose Landing, but currently our program is not managing those. Those are being managed by other management units, and those are Tryon Creek is managing some of those. So in the future, we may absorb those as our unit gets bigger. But right now, these are the properties that our unit currently manages. So at the very bottom, you can barely make it out, but that's the city of Eugene there. And at the very top, it's off the page, but the Portland area is right up there. So we have quite a lot of property spread out among 7 counties. So I used to work at Silver Falls State Park, and when you have to write out a citation to somebody who's have gone above and beyond breaking the rules. So you get out your site book and you go and make sure you give them a proper court date for the county that you're in, which is Marion. Writing out a citation for this unit is very difficult because you got to remember what county you're in, what their court dates are, all those kinds of little things. That's just on that level, let alone building codes and adding new parking lots and stuff like that. Poses a lot of different kinds of challenges.
Or you can change.
Luckiamute staff timeline. That's something I want to bring up here. We started as a unit 5 years ago. So 2018, there was a committee that was formed internally with managers and park rangers. And they come up with this draft plan to develop this whole system about having a unit that focuses on those old Greenway properties along the Willamette. And so the first position that they added was Ranger Scott in South Valley, and he's been working on the Willamette and the southern areas for quite some time. And he's been living in park housing that entire time, and they moved him up to here. And so he was kind of the first ranger that worked along the Willamette. And then later that summer, I transferred here from Silver Falls. There was this new program I kept on hearing about, and it sounded exciting. You get to paddle, you get to drive a jet boat, you get to go on all these adventures, and so I transferred in 2018, and so Scott and I spent the next year property surveys of every single property, all the way from the upper parts of the middle fork and the coastal fork of the Willamette, all the way down to Salvi Island, which ended up being a few times where we dragged a tractor down to Salvi Island to do some blackberry mowing. So, man, how are we going to manage this? Plus the other properties that are up in the coastal and the middle fork. So as the program had evolved, we added an official park manager position, and then we absorbed Thompson's Mills. That was back in 2020. So we gained a park manager, and we gained 2 more additional ranger staff that was already at that unit. So then we were up to some more staff. And then in 2021, we took 3 more additional properties from another management unit, which was Shampooey State Park. They had managed a couple of Greenway properties, including the Molalla River State Park and Parrot Mountain and French Prairie, which are both very low-key properties. And then we also gained another ranger staff from that exchange of properties.
Molalla River, is that near the upper limit?
Yeah, right. That's where our properties, that's where our unit kind of stops.
Yeah.
For now.
For now.
For
You're gonna expand?
Possibly. So we had started from Luckiamute, and we only went up to Grand Island, if you know where that's at. And then once we got that property, we extended that reach by about 20 miles of river property there. So, so there could be a possibility in the future that we might gain more of these properties. And again, they're currently being managed by Oregon State Parks, but they're being managed by other management units that their goals are not specifically focused on Greenway properties. They just sort of have these properties. They have to figure out what to do with them. Our focus is the Greenway properties. So then in 2021, we gained another ranger from another unit, and we hired a park specialist. Park specialist in our world is an office coordinator, which, you know, what's the big deal, right? Well, my manager, who has to pay the bills, and all those portable restrooms that are coming back and forth, and we have best pots and all these vendors going on. That's a lot of paper shuffling and getting the bills paid. And we hired a park specialist. She works right now 32 hours a week, and we keep her very busy here. So behind every great unit, there's all kinds of folks in the background to keep the bills paid, keep the lights on. And so that kind of brings us up to 5 full-time staff, full-time ranger field staff, 1 park manager, 1 park specialist, 2 seasonal positions too that we gained over the last few years. And here's a slide that just kind of gives you an idea of the kind of partners that we deal with or work with, I should say, excuse me. Luckiamute Watershed Council and Calapooya Watershed Council are two watershed councils that we work with quite a bit. How do we work with them? When they want to do a restoration project on Oregon State Park property, we support some of their project plans through grants, through our own natural resources, the department kind of managing some of those, helping them out with writing grants and getting the money to do big projects. Like if you're familiar with the Albany area, there's a park property called Bowers Rocks State Park. It's kind of an odd one because it's called State Park. And there's a lot of associations you have with a state park. You expect like big parking lots and day use areas, but you go there and there's nothing there. It was never finished, which is unfortunate. But it's a really neat area. There's a big, there's a heavily wooded area in the far back towards the river. And Calapooya Watershed Council wanted to fund a very large project, which was connecting a old river channel to a old gravel pit. And it was like a $250,000 project. And so they accomplished that in 2020, I believe is when they finished that. But that was a project that's been in the works for a long time. And they were waiting for that opportunity to get the financial support that we gave them to provide basically. So when the water levels are high, there's an old river system that will activate and different types of fish species will have access to those back channels. So they use some LiDAR mapping to find some of those channels there. They did a lot of plantings and stuff back there. So that's one of the kinds of things
Who are
that
the councils comprised of? Is it farmers that have land abutting to the river, or who's on the council, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, they have volunteers that are from the community. So for instance, Luckiamute Watershed Council, some of the former members that I've known who live in the community here, they were part of that part of that. And they also have paid staff too. So they have specialists, biologists and such, and they have outreach folks that are from the community.
But they must be funded by the people that farm along the river then.
Well,
Because it takes funding, right? I mean.
yeah, so these are a lot of these are funded by grants through OWEB, which is another entity in itself. So that's where a lot of the funding kind of comes from for a lot of these kinds of grants. Willamette River Keepers is one of our biggest groups that we work with. There's a lot of events and programs that we work on that we probably wouldn't do if we didn't have their help. Benton County SWCD, these SWCDs in different counties, they have different, they have kind of the same agendas, but Benton County is a partner that we've had for quite some time, and I'll share the reasons why in another slide. Oregon State University Extension Service, we've partnered with them to do a lot of educational opportunities to help them out to doing like different 4-H programs and even on the water stuff. City of Corvallis, that is a partner. We've worked with them a lot. I'm working on the Marys River and other partners to do annual cleanups. So we have a jet boat here that turns into a garbage barge in some of these types of events. So we have a lot of folks in canoes and kayaks that get out there, but when it comes to getting the garbage back to the dumpsters that are positioned at either at Crystal Lake Boat Ramp or at Michael's Landing, it has to get there somehow. So we've worked a lot with them. I've taken the jet boat up a few times up the Marys during the winter, and there's nothing like trying to take a jet boat that doesn't turn unless it's going like 30, 40 miles an hour, just sort of like freely spinning around in circles. It's kind of fun. City of Kaiser, that's kind of a newer partner that we have. We've been working with them with a lot of events, working out of Kaiser Rapids, and we started doing some cleanups there too this last summer and the fall before that. Salem Area Trail Alliance, That's another partner that we have. On a lot of these properties that we have near the Salem area, there's some trails, particularly speaking, Spring Valley Greenway, which is a small property, but it has about 5 miles of trails. And a lot of those have been optimized for mountain bike use. And this group, that's what their main focus is mountain bike use. So they are another valuable partner that we have. Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, they work on the river, we work on the river. We've done a lot of stuff together there. Oregon State Marine Board, big partner here. They've helped us with the events. We work hand in hand as far as the messaging at the boat ramps, you know, all those kinds of things related to rivers. Getting into some of the parks that we manage, this is Sarah Helmet State Park. Some of you folks may be familiar with this. It was donated by Sarah Helmick herself back in the 1920s, and then it was officially opened in September 1922 on the same day that they finished the Oregon completion of the Lincoln Highway. If you don't know what the Lincoln Highway is, it's where the original 99, the 99 West sits, and it was the longest paved road at that time in the state of Oregon. So it's a huge deal. And at Sarah Helmick in 1922, the governor was there, and like there was a few thousand people there, and there was a marching band and all these different kinds of things. So we acquired that property as the first Oregon state park, and we were under the ODOT division then. And then 100 years later, which was last year in June, we had an event there that we celebrated our 100th anniversary, including we contacted some descendants of the Helmick family, and they came out. And James and Sarah Helmick were pioneers on the Oregon Trail. They came from Iowa, I believe. And they got to the Columbia River. This is like 1840s. And there's a part of the Columbia River where you gotta like put all your stuff on these rafts and float down. I forget what the location of that river, what that part of the river was. But they ended up losing everything. They nearly drowned, and they swam to shore, and some natives took them in, and it took them about a year or so to get back on their feet. And they staked a claim, and this was part of their original claim. And many years later, Sarah Helmick actually herself donated this property to the park system there. Another property that we manage is the Maud Williamson House, Maud Williamson State Park. It's not near the river, but it's kind of part of the string of properties that we manage in that area. And so part of managing that property, we have one of the oldest houses, not the oldest houses in the estate, but one of the oldest houses that Oregon State Parks manages. The front half of the house is built about 100 years ago, so it's kind of young. The back half of the house, it was examined by a professional, and they found boards and beams that were put up back in the 1850s. So
Where is that?
that is at Maud Williamson State Park. And if you take the highway, the back way that takes you to McMinnville, before you make that right turn, if you're traveling northbound to get on to the Wheatland Ferry, it's the house right across from where you make that turn down to the Wheatland Ferry. I think that's called Wheatland Road there. So that's one of the houses there. And of course,
Open to tours.
you know, an interesting note about that house is it's been a place for staff to live at. So the worst thing you can do with an old house is not having someone live in the house, because then you have all kinds of problems. But luckily for that house, there's always been like managers or staff who have moved from one part to another. When you work for Oregon State Parks, you transfer a lot because there's all kinds of opportunities. If you want to promote with our agency, you have to be willing to pick up everything and move. And so we've had a lot of managers who've lived in that house over the years. And so currently we have our safety and risk manager that lives in that house now. So unfortunately, we don't have any tours, but we do have tours of this facility here,
Yes.
which is,
Yeah.
you all familiar with that?
I get a lot of people there, show them to them.
Good.
Visitors from out of state even.
Yeah, it is an incredible place. We gained that. We purchased that in 2004, and there was a ranger before he retired, he was kind of getting the place started. And the delicious flower and the Valley Rose flower, those two on the silos, those were repainted around 2007 or 2008 by a former park ranger from Silver Falls State Park. He turned into an artist. You want to be an artist more than being a park ranger. It's great. It's crazy, right? But she, her business, she repainted the silos there, at least the murals. But it's a very interesting place. Of course, there's all kinds of dynamics to it. It's part of our kind of river theme. We own the water rights to the mill race there. It's under the National Historical Registry. There used to be a town site called Boston, and then once the railroad was put in, that town overnight basically shut down, and they actually physically moved a number of the houses to Shed, where Shed exists now. So you would never know there's like a big field there now, but this facility has changed hands over the years, and it's trying to change its purpose. Like before Oregon State Parks acquired it, the last property owner generated power from this plant or from the dam, and sold some of that back to the power company. And at one time, at the last use of the mill portion, they were using to make grain for animal feed. But everything in this, what's amazing about this place is everything in this thing works. You can take a tour and pull a switch, and all these pulleys and belts will start moving, and it's pretty incredible. However, it's a huge, giant historical building that requires lots of maintenance. So for staff here, that new staff that don't have any experience working on historical buildings, this is a great place to cut your teeth at. So with any historical building, there's a lot of lead paint. So last summer, I don't know if you see that, but the second story where that metal thing is at, we had to remove all the paint from the building below and all the paint from the building on top. And how we did that, and I wish I had pictures, is we rented this huge boom lift, and we went like over 100 feet up in the air, huge basket. And the first step was removing all the lead paint. So we did a lot of research with our safety and risk folks, and they discovered that if you spray it first and scrape it, you won't have any fines coming out. So, which is the hardest thing. If you sand or do any other kind of technique, there's that risk of that lead paint coming up and breathing it in. So the first thing was removing all that paint, and then we repainted all that whole east facing wall with special linseed oil paint. So that took quite a bit of time to get up there and do that. Plus you can't be afraid of heights doing something like this either. But part of the challenge is this is part of the mill race. So the water goes into the dams, and then the water spits out here. And this is a salmon bearing, fish bearing river. So to accomplish this, the first part was just spending a couple of days laying out tarps so that you would catch all the debris from falling into the river. Speaking of challenges, here's the head gates. You can kind of see those old gears. Those are most of them are original. They're cast gears, and there's a motor. How you operate the head gates is you hand turn them, and you place a little key into a little slot, and then then you activate a motor, and that'll bring the head gates up. And then to lower them, you disengage the motor part, and you got to turn them by hand to drop those gates down. So now the complication with this is we can't automate this because this is a historical site. We have private farmland above and below this. We can't risk flooding the whole building because you could damage the building. You don't want to make our neighbors mad by flooding their field. You don't want to flood the field below that And the summertime, you don't want to keep too much water to where the farmer below can't extract water to take care of their field. So there's a lot of like complication with how to operate this, and we have all kinds of graphs so we know at what water level we have to have. And there's a historical landscape plan that whenever we have tours, the water has to be at a certain height. So you got all these different variables, not to mention there's a fire hydrant that has to be underwater. Otherwise, if there's a fire, heaven forbid, the firemen won't be able to use that have access to that water. So there's a lot going on with this particular thing.
So somebody's there full time, man.
Yes, we have somebody there full time. We have an army of hosts that also help take care of it and do the different tours that we have. It's still open, I believe, still seven days a week.
Did you mention that's on the Calapooya River? Because a lot of us run the Calapooya River.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so, geez, I wish I had a map to show you this, but so the Calapooya River runs to the east of that property, and then the water is diverted from the main stem of the Calapooya into a mill race that feeds this mill here. So if you're running the mill race, I don't know how you got there because you had to go through a dam or two, but hopefully, but people do like paddle around the mill race pond, and people do fish out of there and stuff too. So the next slide is kind of covering more of some of the things that it's kind of hard to see with that bar across there. But anyways, we like I said, we manage 7 semi-primitive boating campsites, and again, 3 of those we have portable restrooms at. This kind of gives you an idea of the properties that we have these facilities at. Here's an example of one that we made some upgrades to. This is called Eldridge Bar. It's below the Wheatland Ferry. People have traditionally been camping there for many years, and we just made some upgrades here. Here's Luckiamute Landing being used. So right out in the back 40 of this property, we have 2 developed campsites where we have portable restrooms stationed at. And this is a group that was using this facility. This is the beach. I don't know if you folks have paddled along this section of river or not, but it's a really easy going section of river, pretty mellow here. The other thing that we do is we maintain a system of river miles along the Willamette. These are just the main ones that we manage. Some of these are kind of new that we put in. And so the dream goal with this whole system was to have a river mile every 10 miles along the main stem of the Willamette. So this would be a good indicator for emergency purposes or for directions, because if you never floated this river, every bend kind of looks the same. After a while, having these river miles marker signs, it will give you a good indication on where you're at. So I think I'm speaking to the choir. River mile 0 begins at where the river mouth is at on the Columbia. So river mile 0 is near Scappoose Landing. So we don't have all the signs that we want to put in place, but we're working on that. My boss wrote a RTP grant, which is Recreation Trails Program grant, last year, and he got awarded this grant. And we've been adding additional new signs. We've been working with a couple cities to mount some of these signs on various docks and such, so it'll help folks navigate the river. Here's some examples of some of the signs that we put in. There's the Yamhill Landing. This is Halls Ferry. You can't see there's always been a mile marker at Halls Ferry, but it was really hard to see. So we found a little sandy bluff. And I know we know what happens when you put something into the floodplain. It's like you're just kind of gambling. You don't know how long it's going to be there. One giant wall can just come by and wipe this whole thing out, and there goes all your work. So this particular one, we usually use about 5 bags of concrete. So something new that we're doing with these signs, instead of using wood, we're using 14-foot long steel 3.5 by 3.5 mild steel with 1/8-inch walls, powder coated brown, so we never have to paint it. And we're using 5 bags of concrete. This particular one, because it's in a sandy loam, and I was really worried about a log coming by and hitting it, we got 15 bags of concrete. And there is a log laying right next to it. I went down, I've been checking it like every week or so, because it's part of our weekly run that we do. There's a garbage can and stuff. I don't know if you've ever been to Halls Ferry, but very little, quiet little put in that site. But that kind of goes into the next slide, where one of the challenges on our part is if you want to put anything in new along the Willamette, guess what? The Willamette has never been thoroughly surveyed by archaeologists. So anytime we want to put in a sign or a picnic table or a fire ring, or I failed to mention a lot of our boating campsites have little log books too, to where you can write in your experience, whether you had a great time or whether we've seen entries in these log books to where they're like, great time, wonderful scenery. We saw some bald eagles today, but about 12 o'clock at night, there was an ATV that ran through our campsite. Kind of thing. So it kind of gives us an idea of like how we need to manage it differently. But part of the thing is putting in those kinds of things, we have to have everything examined. So here we're doing some boat trips up the river, taking some archaeologists out so they can do their test holes and make sure they don't find anything. Because our archaeologists within our agency said that if it's up high and it looks like a good camping spot, chances are there's probably something in the ground there, whether it's settlers or Native Americans. And so how do we get materials out on the river? This is how. So we have a jet boat. It's actually parked outside. My boss is going to take it out here soon. And we have certain ways we load this weight in the summer. As you know, some of these channels are like a foot deep. You got a jet boat going on full plane, it'll doing 4 inches of water. But what happens when you put 20 bags of cement in and you got to bring like 3 staff? You're not getting anywhere near that. So you got to figure out another way. It's like, oh, I know this farmer so-and-so. We have a maintenance easement handshake deal. I'll send seasonal aid to drive around, meet us right at the beach, and we'll do a chain gang of cement. But we can only do so much cement at one time because it's the summertime, we'll bottom out or run into a bar. So those are the kind of challenges you have to do. When I worked at like 3 other parks. I've been with Oregon State Parks for about 20 years. And any other park that you put in a sign, it just takes you an hour or so. Putting in like this blue ruin sign is like an epic river adventure. Trying to get out there, get all your things lined up, make sure you're looking at the CFS on all the gauges to make sure you can even get the boat out there. So all kinds of fun challenges. Sometimes things don't go quite the way you wanted them to go. In this instance, we're at a garbage cleanup and the impeller on the jet boat decided to, the keyway decided to shear, and there's really no good field fix to do that.
Paddles.
Yeah, the person I was with isn't exactly an accomplished paddler, and you got a flat bottom, 23-foot long aluminum boat
With cement.
with cement, and you're not going anywhere. You're just spinning in circles. So luckily, Tommy Hutchinson from Benton County happened to be out on the stretch of river, and we flagged him down. Actually, I called him up and he towed us back to the boat. Sometimes some things happen, but we've been asking for a kicker motor for a long time, and we asked us if we can get a kicker motor and say, yeah, just go ahead and buy it. They're only like $4,000, but it's a backup plan.
Right.
Because rowing a flat bottom boat is no fun.
No.
So this kind of gives you a more idea of some of the placement of some of the mile markers. We kind of like figure out visually like how people are going to be floating down the river, but also like we need to put them in a position where it's a higher probability that they're going to make it through a flood event or the average high water here. And these are the kind of things that how we kind of work out here.
Do you guys ever think about putting, like, how in parking lots where they put posts in front of things to keep people from running into it? If you were to put a post in the ground right above the sign, that might at least slow things down.
That's a good idea. Yeah. That's a
extra work.
possibility.
It's extra work, but it might make the
Like your
sign last
guardrail,
longer.
Yeah. We haven't really lost too many signs really, but it's that one thing that kind of floats in the back of your mind. It's like, river doesn't care. The river will do whatever it wants to. So this is another example of us putting in a picnic table here. This is at Harkins Lake. It's up the river, up above Peoria, I guess would be a good landmark for it. I don't know if anyone in the room has ever been there, but it's a really pretty spot along the Willamette. It's on the upper section of the Willamette, so there's more interesting water. We do have a handshake deal with a farmer that we can get into this property, but you know, step one, identifying where we're going to put some of these like amenities at. Step two, get the archaeologists out, go dig some test holes. Step three, figure out the logistics. How are we going to get the cement out? For this situation, each one of these picnic tables take about 22 bags of cement. So we got to dig out a slab and then spend the next few hours mixing and pouring. Dries, come back a week later and assemble the table. The reason why we use these tables is these have been trial tested on the Middle Fork and the Coastal Fork for getting bombarded by trees and all kinds of things. These are really tough. These are designed to be underwater, basically. So you got to have that kind of mindset. So it kind of moves us to another section of kind of our goals is to work with different entities out there to help manage a lot of our aquatic invasives. As you know, there's quite a few out there. So we work directly with Wayne, which is comprised of a number of partners, including Benton County Soil and Water and Willamette River Keepers. And one of the initiatives that they have for this organization is a Wapato revival plan. And so if you don't know what Wapato is, it's a native aquatic plant. It was very important to the Native Americans that lived in the valley. What we've noticed is that different types of invasives, aquatic invasives that shares that same habitat, when you remove that aquatic invasive, the residual seabed of Wapato darts back up. The largest documented Wapato site is on the back channel of the Gail Ackerman property owned by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, just above the Salem area there. But there's a lot of pockets throughout the river system that has this native
Do they
plant.
have purple flowers when they flower?
These are white, I believe.
Oh, what?
So here's a Wayne event. We do a couple of these a year. This is where our role comes into play. We have an armada of about 12 canoes. We right in front of me is his name is Robert, and he currently works for Benton County Water and Soil. And we're doing a Ludwigia hexapetalia pole in a place known as Wapato Cove, which Wapato Cove is known for Wapato until this invasive took over and completely changed that landscape. So River Keeper Richard is in the far canoe there, and he's the Willamette River Keepers. He is their natural resource manager. So he comes out. We have volunteers that come out and help us, and he does a whole presentation on how to pull this plant. This particular plant, if you haven't heard of it, it is like the English ivy of the river. It is bad. It is really bad.
Do you get funding from that invasive species permit fee that we pay as boaters when we have certain craft? We have to pay for that fee so that we can get our boat out there legally.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, maybe that, yeah, that is a really good question.
Because that could really help with that. We see so much invasive species all over the state. And you sit there and you think, man, where did that come from? That don't belong here.
What I like about the Wayne stuff is this is all like grassroots effort. So I kind of show another slide here. This is the Ludwigia plant. There's it's hard to see the caption, but it's Ludwigia hexapetala. So Ludwigia is the genus, of course. Hexpetala is the species. There's another Ludwigia that's not an invasive. This one is. It grows in these huge mats. Is anyone familiar with this plant at all? It is bad. It covers. It's been around for about 10 years. It escaped from a nursery and during a flooding event, and it's choking up a lot of the back channels here. So it grows on these mats so thick that you can walk across. It removes all the dissolved oxygen molecules out of these back channels, so it makes it inhospitable for fish and wildlife. It's very hard to row in. It's very hard to paddle in. It does a lot of bad things. And so when it grows in large, thick, large mats, they have to spray it. If it's in a smaller zone, you can hand pull it, but when you hand pull it, you have to get every single part and bag it. If you let one of those pieces float free, it'll reestablish itself somewhere else. It's a nasty one. So this is this plant here. And so the success of Wapato Cove is Wayne, this organization, with the help of volunteers in the Corvallis area, mainly because this is the section of river from Corvallis to Albany, which actually is the Oregon State Parks has a lot of property along that section. So this is the success here. I wish I had some before pictures, but this is all covered in a thick mat. Granted that invasive has a really pretty yellow flower during certain times of the year, so there's no yellow flowers here now, but the Wapato is starting to come back. And that was something where I had started later. This is like 2020, I think. And we came around the bend, and the volunteers have been coming back year after year, pulling this out. They're almost in tears because, the effort that they put personally to pull this plant, this is the fruits of that labor here, where, the Ludwigia is gone or almost completely gone, and the Wapato is darting back up. So
What about the stuff that you spray those mats with, though? What does that do to the water? So is that some kind of special formula?
Yeah, it's a
to get rid of
special
that?
formula. I know they have used like glyphosate with a surfactant in it, so it's very sticky and it sticks to the plant. It also has a dye. They've been using a lot of blue dye. I noticed they did a bunch of treatments underneath the Mill Creek, where it spills into the Willamette in the Salem area. There was one year where you could see a bunch of blue dye everywhere. It's like, oh, this must be a treated area here. They're trying to do a systematic approach because they know if you treat it down here and you don't treat it down at another section, the plant's going to reestablish itself. But now that you know what this plant looks like, and you float the Willamette during the summer, this will ruin you here because you see it everywhere. I mean, it is up and down. It's really bad, like near Willamette Mission and places like that.
Have you ever seen the boats? They're like a grass mower, like a field grass mower. That has wide blades and it rotates the blades and they drive. Have you seen boats that have that in the back and they have a big bucket and then it's just got a wheel?
No.
And it goes around and it loads that stuff in the back.
No, I haven't.
And it'll clean out an area. Now it won't get all the little bits
Yeah,
and pieces.
that's the problem with this plant. Is like
Well, but you could
Have to.
maybe
Yeah.
run a netting afterwards or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
But the
that's a
boats
good
are,
idea.
they have a big. It's just like a cutter in a field, but it cuts and it just takes that stuff out. I've seen it operating in other places. It just takes everything
you
out.
need some of those.
And then they just have dump trucks and they just load all that stuff into the dump truck. I don't know where they take it.
Out to the next burn pile, so it can be reestablished
Dump it
somewhere
over.
else.
This is my supervisor, Scott, and the gentleman right next to us is Jeremy Owija. He's the manager of the Grand Ron Nursery, the native plants nursery. Pretty cool guy. He's really into rocks. Once we're all river folks here, so I'm sure all you are rock hounds and agate fiends. I'm sure he's got all kinds of lapidary tools and he can polish rock. But this is a shot of us behind Bowers, and he's showing us the proper way to consume stinging nettles without getting stung. So you take the the brand new shoots at the very top, and you roll it with your fingers, and then you can eat it, and it's like a salad, I guess. I didn't really trust them to do that. So some of the other projects that what we've been working on is some of the revetment projects. So this is on Molalla State Park. We didn't have a whole lot of money to do the whole thing. It's estimated to cost about $1 million to remove all these giant tires from the side of the river. We had about 6,000 and removed 12. So do the math, there's a lot more to take out. Speaking of reeventments, if you don't already understand what a revetment is, here's a classic photo. You've probably seen it all over the web, but this is what they used to do with revetments back in the day along the river. My understanding is they would chain all the car bodies up and anchor them somehow to
Try and keep things from washing.
yeah, but the problem, of course, with reeventments is they do these revetments on the bends, and what it ends up doing is it ends up speeding up the velocity of the river, causing further erosion further down. So plus, then the river doesn't have access to
Or
floodplain.
even just
So-
above it causes a little eddy and just
Yeah.
starts eating.
Oh, yeah.
Eating
Yeah.
that away from the.
So those are some of the things that, when we first acquired Molalla, we're like, what? Who put all these tires here?
Is this a recent?
Yeah, so this is obviously the past, but this is something we did last summer. We got some money, we got a little bit of extra money to remove some of the tires. And this is right at the boat ramp for Molalla River State Park. I don't know if you've ever been to that boat ramp. It's nothing to be excited about, but it was one of those things where it's just, not only is it bad on the river, but it's just an eyesore. We're here to protect natural resources, and here we have a bunch of giant tires in the river. So some of the other things that we've identified in the last few years is thanks to COVID, a lot of folks have been finding out about all these little greenway properties that we manage. A lot of these properties have been kind of underutilized. Some of the frequent visitors at some of these properties don't like me using that term because they like to have their own little private park all to themselves. We have about 5 little properties like this along the Willamette, on West Salem on Wallace Road. There's a bunch of little quiet little properties. This is Grand Island here, and all the locals were saying the same thing during 2020, 2021. Like, I've never seen this many people here. And you talk to half these folks, and they were putting in somewhere in the wheatland and floating down. This is a Grand Island here, and they also the same thing. I never knew about this place. We couldn't go on any vacation trips because of COVID, and my friend told me about this place, and we started to check it out. And since that point, the floodgates are open, the word's out. So that has caused us to look at some of our properties differently, and we start to expand the parking lots. And so this is actually at Luckiamute here. Luckiamute has a restriction on the amount of parking spaces we can put in it for very good reasons. It's not a state park, it's a natural area here. So it's sort of like a Oregon State Park's version of a wilderness area, basically, where man is a visitor. So we want to understand that part, but we also want to make sure that people aren't parking all over the place on private land. There's a lot of private land around here. So part of it was reevaluating an area, figuring out, doing some archaeological survey work and finding a place where we can expand the parking lot to accommodate a few more cars here. So part of the fun things about the job is I like to do stuff like this, and I like to run excavators and heavy equipment. I'm a heavy equipment guy. Put me behind a mini excavator with a thumb, and I am in a happy place. Yeah, yeah, right here. Run this thing all day long. We do hazard trees falling. I'm the first person to volunteer to jump on the equipment.
You do logging?
We do hazard, yeah, park rangers, myself, I can fall, I can run equipment, I can spray, I can clean bathrooms, of course. Gotta do park rule enforcement. Sometimes you gotta do evictions for houselessness. There's all kinds of things. You have to be really jack of all trades, sometimes masters of some of that stuff, like excavator work. So when we have hazard trees to fall, like old trees that are falling, and we cut them down, I like to, something about cutting them up into manageable lengths and then picking them up and decking them. I could do that all day long. Me and you are from the same cloth, man. So here's the results from us expanding the parking lot. And that's one of many places that we're doing that with. Of course, we love our volunteers. We do a lot of river cleanups. That was at Half Moon Bend. That was the first time we tried that. That was last summer. This is at Little Halls Ferry here. We have a Rotary Club that has a long term adoptive park agreement. So we work with them every year. This is a cleanup crew along the Salem Kaiser area. Off to the far right is Annette, and she works for Willamette River Keepers, and she works oftentimes as a boater. This particular one, we put in at Wallace and we floated down to Kaiser, and we cleaned up that whole section of river. And there's the garbage barge in the background. Someone's got to run that. Here are some of the things that we encounter. In no surprise, we deal with our own share of houselessness. This one was at Grand Island, which is 20 miles away from the Salem area. We've discovered that some people were hitching rides and they set up camp in the summertime. I thought that little shower facility was kind of an elaborate thing, so I document that. This is a typical thing we find usually in our properties that are closer to the Eugene area, sometimes the Corvallis area. People are set up way back in the woods, and then a visitor mentions there's a tent back there, and we go back there, we find out they've been living out there for a couple days, even a couple weeks. So our standard operating procedure is to tag it, give them a 24-hour notice. Sometimes we've been giving them a lot longer notice because a lot of these folks don't have cars. And so we want to work with them and give them, we want to come from a different place, not from the typical, enforcement ranger side, but we want to work with them, maybe give them some water, but we want them to move along knowing that, we want to make sure that they realize the message that this isn't a place to camp or to dig out and make homemade outdoor showers. So that can be a very touchy, complicated thing when you're going into a situation like that. Or say park rangers are not armed, which is sort of a blessing for us because we go in there from a different way, from a different frame of mind, to where we're trained is when our presence and our words fail, we do a tactical get the heck out of Dodge kind of a situation. So we want to work with these folks more. If they need some services, we want to work with them. But our main goal is still the same, is to get them to leave the parks and hopefully clean up after them. Exactly. More stuff that we encounter, large pieces of styrofoam. Annette found this giant rooster head along that same run. Kind of classic stuff you see along the river, some of the islands. You just see all kinds of stuff like this. So there's always opportunities for volunteer work parties. This is our Willamette River Keeper friends helping us be safety boaters for one of the great Willamette River cleanup sections that we do every year.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Cleanups in Eugene area about every year. And this last year I heard the one in Corvallis. Is that the first one they've done?
They've done a number of them there. Corvallis has been building momentum for quite a while, since before COVID. And I know, I always confuse this. It's like there's Trashy Tuesday and there's a Trashy Thursday. I think Trashy Tuesday is the Eugene one, but there's a Trashy Thursday, and it's a weekly thing that they've been doing there. And we help them out occasionally at the Corvallis one. We've done a couple winters in November when it's like you see 6 volunteers showing up. Man, these folks are committed to their community to help out. It's pretty impressive to run into. You start seeing the regulars coming out. Sad thing is you're dealing with all the garbage is houses related. You're dealing with all kinds of terrible, awful things. We do this at 7 o'clock. So here's another interesting one here. This was before my time. This guy was set up shop just out here on the Luckiamute, and he decided to live out there, and nobody was going to tell him different. Luckily, this gentleman had disappeared. I don't know what happened to his rig, but on the lower end, when we were doing our property surveys when our program first started, we learned about all the houselessness that are in boats in the Portland area, and they constantly have issues like this, if not worse. A lot of sailboats, people don't, they wear out their sailboat. Sailboats are hard to get rid of, so they're probably given away. And there's some Oregon State Park properties that have docks. And they have all kinds of challenges with trying to get these folks to move on. Moving on, we participate in a lot of River E events. Again, Willamette River Keepers is our main our main partner. We do the great Greenway paddle every year. It's in the Salem area there. We usually have 30 to 60 paddlers.
Wow.
We also assist with the Willamette River Keepers. We help out with their paddle Oregon events and their Pinot paddles and some of their other programs that they've been starting to do more often. I got a picture of this guy, Eric, because if you go through the summer and don't find any agates, it's his fault. It's his fault. He is an addict when it comes to agates. I mean, he is.
Must be a relative of my mom somewhere.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. And other groups that we work with, the Eli Environmental Leadership Youth Group. This is through the 4-H Extension Service, and this is to get kids who are in 7th and 8th grade approaching high school to teach them science. We have a lot of research and educational experiences along the Willamette River. This is a bird banding study at Luckiamute. It's still going on now, and we've tapped them a few times to help us with some programs. And so they have Oregon State University has had this long-term banding program here where they're discovering that the same migratory birds that come back to Luckiamute every single year not only come back to Luckiamute, but they come back to the same trees, to the same nests. So they're finding all kinds of interesting things. There's some cold water refugia studies going on Blue Ruin Island. I don't have any pictures of those, but Oregon State University, there's some scientists that are trying to study the cold water refugia. If anyone knows that term, it's kind of the study of where the places are along the Willamette River that have suitable habitat for fish, particularly waters that are cool. And right now, the Willamette River, like many other rivers, are warming, and there's a lack of cold water refuges, basically. And Blue Ruin Island, which is a property that we manage, has one of those cold water refugia sites. And so one of the researchers, I ran into her a few years ago, and she goes out there and dives and sets up cameras on different levels of like the river, and she can see where the fish prefer to live at based upon the hyporheic flow and how the water moves through the gravel bars. It's really fascinating. Other groups that we work with, this is Straub Outdoors, which is a Salem-based outdoor youth educational group. And we did this 2 years in a row. Obviously, this is during COVID. We worked with Oregon State University and the recreation program, and they donated these rafts for us to borrow. I hadn't had much experience operating these before, so that was kind of interesting, especially in the Willamette where it's just like there's virtually no current. So that was kind of fun. And so on this particular one, we were teaching them about oxbows and how rivers form and some kind of basic kind of stuff. And then we actually put in that Luckiamute landing, and we ferried over to the bar where the St. Anne rolls into, which is one of my personal favorite agate hunting spots. But and then we did some geology stuff because there's some really nice sandstone cliffs there that have all kinds of stories to tell. So those are the kind of organizations that we work with. This is very, very recent. This is actually last week. This is the Winter Wildlife. This is the Winter Wildlife event that Ankeny kind of coordinates with a lot of other partners throughout the area, Corvallis, Independence. And so we had some park hosts that were staying here, helping us take care of the park, and they were really into interpretation. So we set up an osprey program, because this year the theme was water. So it kind of dials into what we do. So I came up with an osprey nest building project here for the kids to work on. And then we're getting the last few slides here. Something new we started 3 years ago, and we're going to continue, which is our River Ambassador program. And so the goals of this program is to facilitate safety for everyone. The goal is not to be river guides. We want people, when they go into the river, to have everything they need to be safe. like life jackets, especially for kids, provide basic river information. So we have a whiteboard that we write current information on. And so, and then we also have them track usage. So we kind of get an understanding of how people are interacting with some of our put-in spots. So this is actually at the Paddler's Axis, just right up here, but we've had them stationed at Marshall Island boat ramp a few times. We do this in June or July and August, which are the peak times when a lot of the activities very intense. We're very strategic about it because people in this room don't have a problem with like having the safety gear and having the right gear, all the 10 essentials and such, but it's people who come in there about noon, or they got the coolers of beer and they're tied up with rope, and those are the folks that get sucked into strainers that we hear about later on in the news. So we have them start the stations around 10. Sometimes we've experimented with having them starting at 11 and go later into the afternoon. I've had volunteers that are telling me like, there's people already down in the river, and like, those people we don't need to send this message to. We need to send the message to the people who are going down there, and you know, they want to go down there when it's really hot, and they're very casual, and they don't understand that, you know, even though this river doesn't have class 3s on this section, that river is like a conveyor belt. It's got all this, what I kind of think of as a torque, and lots of torque, you know, to where people underestimate this river. So we want all of our visitors to be set up for success. So we hand out life jackets, particularly to children, water bottles, and all kinds of other different things. And so we're expanding this program. We're going to have another season this year with some new volunteers, one of which is a pretty avid paddler. So we've had volunteers in the past who had some experience way in the distant past, just to get the pilot kind of going. But I'd love to see this expand and go to other properties that we don't own and manage, like having one at Peoria boat ramp and some of the other ones that get a lot of activity, a lot of with the college crowd and various other kind of things. So
Didn't they just put a new, isn't it, so aren't kids not, they don't have to wear life jackets below a certain age?
Oh, yes, they do.
Oh,
16 and younger have to wear a life jacket.
No matter what.
That is the law.
State law.
That is a state law. 16 and under. So,
Whether they're on an inner tube or not,
right.
because it used to be if there's on an inner tube, that's considered a
It's-
potential.
Exactly, it's still
If
that
they're-
way.
If they're on the dock, they need to have a life jacket
But
on.
if they're in the inner tube, they don't need to.
They have to have a
Yes, they
life
do.
jacket on. Yep.
Yes, they do.
That is a law. Now that we all know, just because that's the law doesn't mean
Oh,
a lot of people follow it.
Yeah. I
And-
know that.
You know, there's
I've seen
not
too many
enough
examples.
resources to enforce a lot of this stuff too.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're not enforcing those rules.
No, you're
we're just-
recommending.
We're just recommending, we have, so the Oregon State Marine Board gives us a lot of these life jackets for absolutely free. So we're handing them out. If we see a family and their son doesn't have a life jacket, we just give it to them. We don't preach to them. We don't tell them they're doing something wrong. We just say, hey, you know, you could probably use a life jacket.
Thing
So
is, they'll probably take it and throw it in the bottom of the boat anyway.
maybe, or they'll use to sit on, you know,
Right.
things like that. So,
At least it's close.
Yeah,
If
you gotta
you
get
gotta
it.
grab it, hang on
Yeah.
to your life.
yeah. So basically, this is the kind of final slide here. What is next? What are we doing now? Continuing our park improvements, looking at ways that we can fine tune some of the parking lots that we have. Protection of our new assets. We have restrooms, we have all kinds of signs, and sometimes you just can't have nice things up there. This is the Marshall Island restroom, which always gets bombarded with all kinds of activity. You get to learn how to use a hammer
You should paint it
drill.
green and it won't show up.
Continued current partnerships, so all of our wonderful partnerships we have now, but we want to expand on those because we can't do this alone.
If maybe you took that outhouse and had a beautiful mural or something painted onto it, they'd still tag it.
You know, that's an interesting thing. thing you bring up, I know the BLM for years has been doing the American flag on some of their signs. Because when they have an area, I used to work for ODF, and I discovered that through them, and they would actually intentionally put American flags on signs that always had a tendency to get shot up. I don't know if it worked or not, but you know, it's just one of those creative solutions around some kind of
Right,
situation.
well, it wouldn't
So
be
you
a
put-
blank, it wouldn't be a blank canvas
If
anymore.
you put a
That's something
piece
wrong.
of art there, maybe they might not need to have the need to express themselves,
Right.
maybe. And then continue our furious battle with aquatic and terrestrial invasives. I didn't even talk about the terrestrial stuff. We have a T650 tracked bobcat out there with one of those forestry mowers, and we have a lot of old farm properties that have like 10-foot high hedges of blackberry, and yeah, that's another fun, you know,
Yeah.
toy to play with out there. And we have berry blenders, and we're always mowing terrestrial.
Devil's Club.
You know, we don't have Devil's
Oh, yeah,
Club
you
here.
do.
No, not in the valley, really. We have a lot of other things that we
We
have to
do
do.
that on our acreage off
Huh.
of the LC Highway,
Well, yeah, off of
the
Elsie.
Cedar Hill, Cedar Creek. Off of Cedar Creek Road. So it's thick and big.
Oh, yeah, that's a nasty plant. You know, offering new experiences too. A concessionaire had approached us a few years ago about putting in kind of a glamping experience. So that's something that might happen eventually. Universal accessibility improvements. We don't have a lot of ADA facilities for folks who want to get in the river. There's one that I know of, and it's at Shampooey, and it's at a boat ramp that has a huge long ramp to down there. There's no way that someone in a wheelchair is going to be able to access that, but those are-
They go flying.
I know, those are some of the things that, you know, we've been kind of thinking about and wondering about ourselves, ways that we can improve that. You know, and a theme that our Oregon State Parks is dealing with too is just making parks more welcoming to everyone. You know, also, we're about allowing folks to come to these properties, whether they get there by jet boat or by non-motorized boat. We have no way of like controlling how people have fun on the river. So we're more about welcoming every kind of user out there that is respectful and
Right,
going to
that's the key
play that
word,
road
is
right
to be
there, yeah.
respectful.
I mean, if you want to go water skiing, there's plenty of lakes and stuff out there to do that with. But luckily, because of the way some of the river stretches are in the summertime.
They're not deep enough. to-
No, yeah, it's like Wheatland Bar and a few other bars like that are like the skill filter. Like that's when you find boats that are stuck because they. It's like you gotta have a jet boat to get through here for the first reason, and second of all, like you don't know where to even go. I mean, they don't have polarized shades on, they don't have any of those tools of the trade. So
Probably that way, Jack.
that basically concludes to my presentation here. I wanted to give you all folks, you know, a concept of what the park system has been working on the river, and have any questions?